The sun blazed down, its heat shimmering off the dusty desert sands in waves. In the middle of the vast, arid expanse of Arizona, the U.S. Border Patrol outpost stood like a lone sentinel against the unforgiving land. A couple of rusting vehicles and a few old shipping containers dotted the perimeter, offering minimal shelter to the soldiers stationed there. Inside one of the guard towers, Sergeant Marcus Mac Griffin leaned forward, his eyes scanning the horizon. The landscape stretched for miles, nothing but scrub brush and dry earth, punctuated only by the occasional cactus or distant mountain range. Mac had seen his fair share of quiet days. As a veteran of 2 tours in Afghanistan, this job stationed at a border security post miles away from the nearest town felt like the calm after a storm. It wasn't the most glamorous post, but it was his duty. He had learned to appreciate the silence, the space. In this part of the country, the world felt far away. It was easy to forget that just on the other side of the border, a whole different set of realities existed. People looking to cross, cartels pushing product, desperate families trying to survive. It was all out there. But here, for now, it was just Mac and the quiet. He had been here for nearly 6 months now, far removed from the busy, hectic lifestyle he used to have in the cities of the East Coast. His transition had been challenging, but he made do. Every now and then, he'd hear a vehicle or two pass by, but they usually kept their distance. This particular stretch of border was remote, and Mac had gotten used to the occasional solitude. The job required a steady hand and a keen eye, but it didn't take much else. Just the endless miles of border fence, and the knowledge that you were responsible for keeping what lay beyond it from slipping through. But today felt different. The sound of roaring engines broke the silence, growing louder and louder as it approached. At first, Mac thought it was just a couple of trucks hauling goods, the kind that frequently passed by the border. But the noise was too loud, too throaty. It wasn't the rumble of diesel engines. It was the deep growl of motorcycles. A lot of them. His hand instinctively moved to the sidearm holstered at his waist, and his eyes narrowed. The motorcycles weren't slowing down. If anything, they were speeding up, heading straight for the border post. Mac rose from his post and moved quickly to the edge of the guard tower, peering out over the arid landscape. 4 motorcycles appeared on the horizon, cutting through the desert with the force of a storm. The riders wore leather jackets, some of them with patches that made Mac's blood run cold. The insignia, skulls, and flames weren't from any biker group Mac had heard of, but the menace in the air was unmistakable. These were troublemakers looking for a fight, for something to prove. They weren't here for a peaceful pass. He spoke into the radio strapped to his chest, his voice calm but firm. "This is Border Security Post 1. 4 motorcycles heading toward my position, 10 miles out. Potential threat. Requesting backup." The radio crackled, but no one answered. Mac had known it would be like this. This part of the border was too remote for fast response teams. Backup would take at least 30 minutes, maybe longer. It was just him and the few soldiers stationed further out. He wasn't about to let them get close without making sure they understood who they were dealing with. As the motorcycles closed in, Mac made his way down the ladder from the tower. His boots hit the dusty earth with a soft thud. He adjusted the rifle slung over his shoulder and stood tall, ready for whatever came next. The bikers slowed as they neared the post, coming to a stop just outside the small perimeter of the outpost. The leader of the group, a broad-shouldered man with a thick beard, dismounted and looked toward Mac with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The other bikers followed suit, stretching their legs and cracking their knuckles, as if preparing for something. Mac stayed where he was, his body tense, but his posture unyielding. He wasn't intimidated. He had seen worse, much worse. But he knew better than to make the first move. These men were looking for trouble, and he had no intention of giving them a reason to escalate it. Still, he had to be ready. The leader walked up toward him, his boots crunching on the dry earth. His smile was sickly sweet, but there was a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Hey there, soldier. Looks like you're a little far from home, huh? What's a guy like you doing out here in the middle of nowhere?" Mac didn't answer immediately. Instead, he simply stared at the biker, sizing him up. The man was at least 6 inches taller than him, muscular and intimidating. But Mac had dealt with men like this before. He could handle it. "I'm doing my job," Mac said flatly, his eyes never leaving the man's face. "You're trespassing. I need you to turn around and leave." The biker chuckled, as if the idea of a lone soldier telling him what to do was amusing. "You think you can tell us what to do? We're just a bunch of guys passing through. No harm, no foul, right?" He glanced over his shoulder at the others, all of whom were now circling around Mac in a loose formation dot, one of the other bikers. A wiry man with a patch over one eye sneered. "This is our turf now, soldier. You think you can stop us?" Mac's fingers twitched toward his sidearm, but he didn't draw it yet. "I don't want trouble, but I will defend myself if it comes to that." The leader's grin faded, and his eyes narrowed. "You know what I think? I think you're out here all alone, and you think you can play hero. You can't stop us. You don't even have the backup to back you up. So, what's it gonna be, huh?" Mac took a step forward, his boots crunching against the dirt with purpose. He was sick of these kinds of men, people who thought they could intimidate just because they had numbers. He wasn't backing down. "I don't want to repeat myself," Mac said, his voice low and steady. "This is your last warning. Leave. Now." The biker leader scoffed, a harsh laugh escaping his lips. Without warning, he made a motion with his hand, signaling the other bikers to move in closer. Mac's hand snapped to his rifle, but before he could raise it, the man with the patch lunged at him, pulling something shiny from his jacket. It was a knife. Mac's instincts kicked in. He sidestepped the man's lunge, using the rifle to shove him back with a sharp movement. The biker stumbled, cursing, but Mac didn't hesitate. He aimed the rifle at the ground and fired a single shot, the sound echoing through the desert like a crack of thunder. The bikers froze, eyes wide. The sound of the gunshot still hung in the air, and the tension was palpable. The leader's face turned crimson with anger, but there was a flicker of caution in his eyes now. He had underestimated the soldier. "You better think long and hard about what you're doing," Mac said, his voice unwavering. "I'm not here to start a fight, but if you push me, I will end it." The leader opened his mouth, about to shout something, but then a moment of realization passed through him. He looked around at his men, saw the uncertainty in their eyes. These weren't hardened criminals. They were just looking to stir up trouble. They had expected an easy target, and they hadn't found one. With a final glare, the leader spat on the ground and turned, motioning for the others to follow. The bikers mounted their motorcycles and, after a few tense seconds, they roared off into the distance, the sound of their engines growing fainter with every passing second. Mac watched them go, his rifle still raised, ready in case they decided to change their minds. But they didn't. The desert fell silent once again, the only sound the wind sweeping across the vast, empty landscape. He exhaled slowly, letting the adrenaline begin to fade. The confrontation was over. The bikers had learned the hard way that messing with the wrong soldier on a remote border post was a mistake they wouldn't make again. Max stood there for a moment longer, surveying the quiet desert. He had done his job, just like he always did. But this time, it had felt different. This time, he had faced down a group of troublemakers and had come out on top. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the desert floor, Mac knew he was ready for whatever came next.